Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for taking time. Tonight, we're going to conduct a listening session. My name is Chris Norrington. I'm the director of the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. We're both online with a Zoom and also in the room. Thank you. We have quite a number of people here. So first, I'm just going to introduce a couple of concepts. First, why are we here? And that's to listen. MEPA is a really important part of what we do, and I think that's why you're here as well. When we've been in Helena and Billings, very well attended, both in the room and online, lots of comments, and we really welcome all of your input. MEPA is and has been a clear step to assess impacts. It's a tool, a very important one to inform the public and inform us as agencies, and to collect and take in information and feedback. Tonight, we continue to honor that statute by engaging in a respectful session about MEPA and how the state and DEQ in particular might improve upon its work. Really welcome the respectful dialogue at the podium. And what we'll do tonight, with this great attendance, we have about 30 people, 32 signed up, 15 online. I'll just do the math. So you have, I'll split the minutes accordingly, and then what we'll do is give everyone an equal amount of time. At the end, we'll give folks an opportunity to re-select in, and we will end in about 2 hours. Thank you again so much. We welcome your thoughtful input tonight and the opportunity to speak with us. And I ask for only a moment just to consider that we are very much here on purpose. We want to hear your feedback, welcome you. We're listening, and thank you. I acknowledge my team who has spent a tremendous amount of time setting up meetings, scheduling meetings, getting space for us to be together, listening here tonight, both in the room, and I have some staff also online. First, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Harbidge. She's our public policy director. She'll share with you a little bit about MEPA and then some of the ground rules for tonight's meeting. And I sure welcome and thank her for her hard work. Thank you.
Quite as tall as the director. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Harbidge. I'm the public policy director at DEQ. And what that means for tonight is that I manage our centralized MEPA program. So I'm going to go through 6 points, just 6 of a MEPA 101. And why am I doing that at a MEPA listening session? It's because I understand that many of you do have a lot of familiarity with MEPA, the Montana Environmental Policy Act, but some of us might be coming into the room with a little bit less familiarity or less understanding of the act. So point number 1, what is MEPA? Well, MEPA is a process. It's a process through which state agencies and state officials are required to analyze the potential impacts of proposed projects and those impacts on the environment, both the physical environment and the human environment, and then share those impacts and that analysis with the public before we take action or make a decision. Specifically under MEPA, the projects that are covered are considered state actions. Every state action with the potential to impact the human environment requires some level of MEPA review. State actions include projects that state agencies are undertaking ourselves. So if you are, say, the Department of Transportation and you're working on a highway project, that would be a state action. MEPA also covers state actions that are in the form of issuing a permit or a license, some sort of an approval for somebody else to do a project. MEPA also covers state actions in the form of issuing funding for a project. So if a state agency gives out grants, that would also be considered a state action. Point number 3, MEPA is not the same as permitting. So at DEQ, MEPA review is triggered when we receive a permit application, and the MEPA review runs parallel to our permitting review, but they are not the same thing. Under our permitting statutes in Montana is where you will find things like standards, requirements, pollution limits, things that limit the impacts on the environment when a project takes place. No permit is approved by DEQ if it does not comply with permitting statutes and those environmental laws. Point number 4, MEPA, on the other hand, is about looking before you leap. It's about making sure that agencies are making informed decisions so that we know what the impacts may be before we decide to approve or deny or modify a permit. It's focused on knowing those impacts and then also disclosing potential impacts to the public, even when those impacts are outside of the permitting authority of the agency. So what I mean there is there may be people who apply to DEQ for a permit. We run through a MEPA analysis, but we identify impacts that actually would require permitting from a different agency, and DEQ wouldn't have authority to control or limit those impacts, because that is not what DEQ would do. We're looking at environmental permitting specifically. Point number 5, what does MEPA look like on the ground then? Under MEPA, state officials, like I said, prepare an environmental analysis of the potential impacts. Typically, what you would see from us is we would publish an environmental assessment, or EA, or an environmental impact statement, or EIS. Those are the terms that you'll hear tossed around if you're talking about MEPA with anybody. Those two different types of documents both do essentially the same thing. They disclose the potential impacts of a proposed action to the public. Typically, EAs, environmental assessments, are prepared when it's clear the impacts will not be significant. But EAs can also be a first step to determining whether the impacts will be significant. If we do an EA, or if we just decide at the beginning that the impacts are expected to be significant or might be significant, we'll do an EIS, which requires a much more detailed and thorough analysis. Final point, number 6, MEPA is a public process. So I mentioned that we prepare these documents, we then publish those for review and comment. And the level of public involvement is determined by the agency really based on the complexity of the project, the complexity of the anticipated impacts, and also the level of public interest in the project. And I just want to say, comments are so valuable to what we do under MEPA. Without the knowledge of the folks who are living in the area near the project site, we don't necessarily know exactly what's going on in that site. So as the director said earlier, we're here because we want to hear from you about the impacts that we should be looking at under MEPA when we do these reviews. Public input can absolutely alter our analysis, and it can make a difference in determining whether we do an EA, we do an EIS, and it ensures that we're making informed decisions. That's our MEPA 101 for the evening. Next, I want to just switch gears and talk about some expectations and ground rules for tonight. We do have a lot of folks here in the room, and we have some joining online. So I just wanted to express that I would really appreciate if we can have a public discussion and not a debate. There are a variety of perspectives out there on MEPA generally, but also MEPA specific to some of the topics that will come up tonight. And I just ask that everybody please listen with an open mind, listen respectfully. We're seeking solutions-oriented comments and suggestions. We really want to hear from as many people as we can. So as the director said, we will be tallying the number of folks who've signed up to comment, and then we'll try to divide the time evenly. We can be a little bit flexible, but please understand that time will be limited tonight. It's not your last chance to comment or speak on this topic. So after tonight, we have one final listening session that is virtual only, scheduled on November 1st. That will be during the business hours. So if folks can't make it in the evening, if that's challenging, you can always join the one on November 1st. We are also continuing to accept public comments through the comment portal through December 1st. So you have a full additional month and a half approximately to prepare your written comments and submit those to the agency. And like I said earlier, we really ask that you do provide feedback. We're super interested in all of the perspectives as we go through this process. So with that, we'll transition into our listening session and hope to allow as much time as we possibly can. I think the way we'll approach this is we will call the names who have signed up on one sheet. And when we call your name, if you could please line up behind the podium, and we'll try to rotate through folks as quickly as we can so we don't have to wait for everybody to get up and walk to the podium in between. We will also be taking notes as you're speaking. So if you notice that we're not making eye contact with you, please don't interpret that as us not listening. We're actually jotting down everything that you're saying. So we'll be taking notes. And then we will also be recording the meeting tonight. So just want to make sure everybody is aware you will be recorded when you come up to speak. So thank you very much, and we'll get started.
Right, thank you, Rebecca. And since we have about 50 speakers in 110 minutes, it's 2 minutes per. If we get to the end and someone has not used all their time, and we get to the end of the evening and we add a little bit more, I'll poll the group, and if you'd like to add 2 more minutes of comment, we'll do so to up until 8 o'clock hour. Thanks so much. So first, I'm just gonna call our first page, folks. Alicia Gossen, and Amy Sillenberg. I apologize, I cannot read the last name. It looks like. Oh, it's Lena Evans. You guys could choose who goes first, but those are the first 3. Thank you. Hello and welcome.
Thank you. Is that on?
No, it's not. There's a button on the
Yep.
top.
What's that?
Perfect.
It's on. Okay,
Will you say your name too, please? Thank you.
yeah. My name is Amy Silverberg, that's Cilimberg, and I am actually speaking on the behalf of Climate Smart Missoula. We're a local nonprofit, and we've been working on climate solutions since we were founded in 2015. I want to thank you for this listening session. It's good that you just expressed that you're really excited to hear from all of us and from more folks around the state. We have talked to a lot of people. We know a lot about MEPA, and we are very interested in DEQ analyzing the impacts of climate change. It's why we're all here. Most of us are here tonight. And to basically not stall, just get on it. We know you have the tools and knowledge. We've worked a lot with folks from DEQ over the years. You have an amazing staff. You have a lot of smart people. We believe that you can analyze it. People are doing this all around Montana, the country, and the world, and it's time. We don't have time to waste, is what we all learned this summer with the held the Montana trial. It may be that some of what you determine through MEPA analysis means that in the permitting process, we actually have to say no to some things. And I feel, and I think a lot of folks here, Climate Smart Missoula, feel like that's okay. We are going to need to say no to carbon pollution so we can say yes to the myriad of really exciting climate solutions that we have out there. And so sometimes saying no means that we can also then say yes. And we just appreciate you hearing from all of us and take climate seriously, especially considering the social costs of greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Alicia?
I think I'm Alicia with the bad handwriting that you mentioned.
No,
So it's Alicia, ALYSHA, Goheen, GOHEA. So I'm here tonight, not so much as a content expert, but as a lifelong Montanan, a concerned citizen, a volunteer for Families for a Livable Climate, and a mom of 2 kids that I love. 2 young people who inspire me every day with how they stand up for what they care about, and with their hope for the future. And my daughters were so inspired, as was I, by the held trial, and the fact that these young people stood up for the future for us all. And now I'm here tonight to continue that effort. My whole family believes that in order for us to work towards a livable future, we're going to have to start taking climate change into consideration all the actions that we take. And we believe that DEQ actually has the expertise, again, like Amy said, available tools and oversight responsibilities to do that. In the MEPA handbook, it says, the quote, that Montana can anticipate, the reason why this act was put into place so that Montana can anticipate and prevent unexamined, unintended, and unwanted consequences, rather than continue to stumble into circumstances or cumulative crisis. While the impending climate crisis could not be more of a clear fit for this mandate. As noted by others here that will speak tonight, we need to start now without stalling or delays in addressing this most important issue of our time. My family, like so many others in this room, implore you to do what my 11-year-old asked me to do when I said I was coming here tonight. She said to ask you to please wake up, move forward, and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Elena.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Elena Evans. I'm an environmental health manager with Missoula County. As with most cases where I speak publicly, I see a lot of this through the lens of Smurfit Stone. That's our Superfund site 11 miles downstream from here. And so I think in addition to looking forward and seeing what ways climate change and the impacts of greenhouse gases can be better incorporated into permitting, this larger conversation about MEPA is also an opportunity to look at and identify ways in which DEQ and other state agencies can work together to improve the cohesion between agencies and what they're working on currently. There's a lot of new tools that can be brought to bear when it comes to MEPA and synergy therein. If there's a water right application for 15 million gallons per day that is happening in the location of a Superfund site, it'd be pretty sweet to have all of their agencies working on that be notified and have the public aware that that's something that is being discussed between agencies and behind doors. And that perhaps the EA or just EA really on the water rights is done in conjunction with what's happening at DEQ. I think when it comes to climate change, our community and many others also have that local knowledge to bring to bear. May it be a channel migration zone study or local research here at the University of Montana discussing changes in runoff periods and cyclicity. Ooh, that's not right. Anyways, climate changes therein and how that's going to impact everything. So I'm a bureaucrat and I'm happy to bureaucrat more with folks on some things that I think could really be some sweet tools to bring to bear. Thanks.
Thank you, Lena. The next three, Jeremy Drake, Peggy Trink, and David Merrill.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jeremy Drake. I am a Missoula resident. I have a family here, father of 2 boys, and I'm here because I want a clean and healthful environment for them, for everybody. And to that end, MEPA works. My sons are here. They'd rather be outside playing with their friends, but they have to be here because, with all due respect, DEQ isn't doing what Judge Seeley ruled it needed to do with the health trial in terms of the assessment of climate impacts. During that trial, DEQ rep said the department has the tools to assess climate impacts. MEPA isn't broken. You have the tools. There's no time to delay. I appreciate this opportunity to be heard tonight, but the way forward is clear. It's not from hearing the same message over and over again. It's time to focus on protecting our rights to a clean, healthful environment so our kids can get back to being kids. Time for action is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
It's up a discussion just a little bit here. Good evening. My name is Peggy Trank, and I'm a Missoula resident, but I'm also here today on behalf of the Treasure State Resources Association. We represent a lot of the folks who use land and resources to produce food, to produce energy, and produce the raw materials that allow us to build things like solar panels and cell phones and computers. We're going to take a little bigger look at MEPA, I guess, not totally focused on the health decision. So just from the perspective of the work we do, there's been a lot of discussions over, I've been governor for 30 years, about MEPA for 30 years, and we made changes in the statutes. We talked about it off and on, and it's always been kind of a static process. But what's been consistent over those years is that the legislature has affirmed it is a procedural statute. It's a process. It's an important process. Somehow that's gotten lost. It's an extremely important process, but it's not substantive like the permitting statutes. And so we like to make sure that we stay focused on that. We do have strong environmental permitting statutes, some of them the strongest in the nation, perhaps even in the world. So folks should be confident that there is that underpinning. I did a little revisit to the Citizens Guide myself because I hadn't read that for a long time on MEPA. And one thing that stood out that I'd like to just read, MEPA does not control or set regulations for any land or resource use. It's not a preservation, wilderness, or anti-development act. It's not a device for preventing industrial or agricultural development. If implemented correctly, MEPA should encourage economic development that is environmentally and socially sound. I think that's implemented correctly is what we struggle with. One of the things we just like to suggest and think about going forward is there a way to continue to encourage lots of public involvement, public comment, but have it not be so much a referendum on a project, but really thoughtful and thorough vetting of the project to see if we can make it the best project possible. That information does get handed over to the agency and they'll decide in the permitting statutes what to do about that. Perhaps it is to deny a permit, but in the end, that is the job of the permitting statutes. Just a quick comment about the greenhouse gas question. We understand that there's a legal process going on. And I've heard folks talk about there's lots of models and examples we could be using for analysis, but the federal government really hasn't settled on one, and I kind of wondered how do we know it's the best one? If we move forward in the rush that we're in, we'll have given more thought to how to provide sufficient elk hiding cover than we are going to give to greenhouse gases. Those are important too, but please don't rush it. Give it some thought, give it the right process so that we do it the right way. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, thank you.
Hi, my name is David Merrill, and I'm here representing the thousands of supporters and members we have across the state of Montana and the Montana Sierra Club. I would like to address the most distressing aspect of the climate change issue, the sheer lack of time. The first presidential briefing on global warming was delivered to President Johnson in 1965. The IPCC said in 1990 that stabilizing CO2 in the atmosphere required reducing emissions 60% by 60 to 80% globally and immediately. With this huge mandate for action, we hear this familiar tune, wait, which so far has meant wait forever. Taking a year to set up a stakeholder group seems to be wasting valuable time. And why are you asking us how to do a climate analysis? You're the experts. If I'm about to get brain surgery, I don't want the surgeon to ask me how to proceed. The judge in Helvey, Montana didn't say wait. She said start considering climate immediately. Our young people aren't saying wait. Stones and trees in the mountains aren't saying wait. It's time, time is up. Let's start analyzing climate change immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, please, Jocelyn LaRue, Emily Brown, Chelsea Liddell.
Good evening. My name is Jocelyn LaRue. It's Leroux, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Montana Conservation Voters. Thank you so much for having us here and for listening to us. So Montanans 50 years ago sat down to craft a state constitution with future generations in mind, and that's something that we still need to keep in mind today. This forward-thinking group enshrined every Montanan's right to a clean and healthful environment in our constitution. This right must be upheld by MEPA. The recent Helvey, Montana case, which many people have talked about, many people will continue to talk about tonight, was very clear that DEQ must consider climate change. And as was mentioned previously, in this case, DEQ even stated that they currently do have the resources to consider climate change in the MEPA process. So this comment period and proposed stakeholder group does appear to be a tactic to slow down this process to assess climate change. And so I'm here to ask you today to please put that aside, do what you have the resources to do, consider climate change to protect our clean air and clean water for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Liddell, LIDDELL. I'm a resident of Missoula. I'm also a natural resource economist, and I spend my days working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with energy production. I'm also an outdoor recreator, and I understand that our clean and healthful environment is the most important resource that we have in Montana. Not only because it's important for our economy, but it's also the most important thing we have for our health, having clean water and air and a climate that's not extremely volatile and extremely warm. It's just the most important thing for the well-being of Montanans. 2023 is the hottest year we've seen, and we don't see that trend changing. As a natural resource economist, I know that the techniques for assessing the pros and cons associated with different environmental impacts are not new, and they're not challenging to do. They exist now, and we can do them now. And as someone who works in the energy space, I know that saying no to certain emissions producing energy producing resources is not saying no to advancing or to having power, but there are many things, alternatives. So I echo Amy and say sometimes we do need to say no in order to make progress and look for alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Chelsea. We're going to shift just a moment to those online. For those online, if you would like to speak, just raise your hand. We'll go through a round of that in order to give them a fair opportunity. George Harris, would you like to go?
Oh, Mr. Director Chris Dorrington, I'm George Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Coal Council. And on behalf of the Montana Coal Council, I'd like to commend you and your staff for reviewing MEPA. Like me, members of the coal industry also love Montana. We strongly desire to keep our environment clean and healthful and healthy. Montana coal is abundant, it's affordable, and it is clean. We have 1/3 of the nation's coal with the highest potential coal reserve of 118 billion tons, and that's statistics from U.S. Energy Information. Montana coal is affordable, keeping our costs at 9 cents per kilowatt hour, among the lowest in the nation. Montana is meeting state and federal environmental standards. Coal emissions have been reduced by over 93% in the past 2 decades, making it a clean resource due to millions of dollars of industry investment in clean coal technology. Power plants being built today emit 90% less pollutants than plants that they're replacing from the 70s. 85% of the nation's electrical grid comes from fossil fuels, including coal, oil, and natural gas. Coal produces over 20% of that grid, keeping our lights on, keeping our homes warm in the winter and cool in the summer. We need all resources, including wind and solar. However, they produce less than 15% of the nation's grid, and they haven't moved the needle more than 2% in the last 2 decades. Coal is 24/7, not just when the wind blows or the sun shines. Coal demand has tripled since the 70s and will continue to grow worldwide for generations to come. Coal is the world's most reliable resource. Economically, the coal severance tax in Montana has brought in $2.4 billion since 1975 to the general fund. It produces over 28 million tons of coal a year. It provides over 890 high-paying jobs and $100 million of annual payroll. It presently has over $1 billion in the coal trust fund. With all
Mr.
this,
Harris, final
yes.
comment.
thank you. MEPA is clearly a Montana process, not a regulation. We've heard a lot of testimony that the held case mandates DEQ to immediately evaluate greenhouse gas and climate change in every permit or project considered. Defendants have petitioned the district court to clarify that its order does not require agencies to consider such in their MEPA analysis, but merely invalidates the prohibition of such consideration, that declaring the MEPA limitation unconstitutional is not commanding the state DEQ to consider greenhouse gas emissions or climate change in every project.
I have to cut you off, this is your past time, sir. Thank you for your comment. Julia Altimus online.
Good evening. Thank you, Director. Julia Altimus, I'm here in Missoula. I'm representing the Montana Wood Products Association. And I guess I just wanted to just have a couple quick comments. I think what the DEQ wanted from the public is to talk about MEPA and the process of MEPA and how it could be improved, not necessarily programs that may come out of a MEPA decision. So again, as a reminder, MEPA is a process. It's not programmatic. It is a look before you leap for sure. And MEPA does not control or set regulations for any land use or resource use. I think that's really important that we keep in mind as we move forward. I do believe that it's really important to keep the public involved early and often. They often can bring information to bear that the agency will take into consideration as it's making its decisions. But in the end, the agency will have to make a decision because MEPA is just a process for the public to be involved. So we will submit some more expansive comments towards the end of your deadline. But again, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Julia. Walter Roundtree online.
Hi, my name is Walter Roundtree. Last name spelled Rowntreee. Since March the 22nd of 1972, Montana state agencies have been required to protect the environment for current and future generations. That includes the negative effects of carbon pollution. Okay, you didn't know, but you have known now for several years. To behave as if the clock for figuring out how to do that started with the held decision is disingenuous. You've known about the need, the constitutional requirement to prevent the adverse effect of carbon pollution for years. We've known, the courts have known, but they didn't say anything. The truth is they should not have had to. Now is the time to start doing your job. You don't need a bunch of study to figure out how to prevent carbon pollution from harming current and future generations. You can and should immediately start being assertive about controlling carbon pollution. MEPA needs to be a tool used to facilitate that. Thank you.
No one else online, go back to the sheets. Emily Brown, second chance, in addition to the news. Amber Cheryl.
Now that correctly. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for being here and for listening to us. And for holding these sessions. And I also want to say thank you from Missoula, and I do not represent the U, but also the U for the money in 16 and 18 that was given to electrify our bus system. So I appreciate that. We've had great success in that. My name is Amber Cheryl, and I am the current Missoula City Council representative for Ward 4. I'm the chairperson for our city's Climate Conservation and Parks Committee. Our city has worked, and our city staff has worked across departments over the last 2 years to develop a climate lens that we use to make all of our decisions and that helps city council make decisions. We've done this because we recognize as a municipality our responsibility in upholding the citizens' constitutional right to a clean and a healthful environment. We recognize that that is our responsibility at every level of government to do this. We have the science, or at least you guys do, I don't, but we have the science. We know climate change is happening and we know what's causing it. And we know that it's urgent. I understand that the legislature put some handcuffs on you guys in 2011 a bit to consider this as part of MEPA and looking at permitting and projects. I understand that. We also know that now we have Health versus Montana, and we have an opportunity to take a look at carbon emissions and at climate change when we're considering projects in the future. So that's really my comment here, as you review MEPA, I believe the DEQ has the responsibility to uphold the constitutional right of the citizens of Montana. I ask that during environmental review of projects, you prioritize this right by including greenhouse gas emissions as well as climate change as metrics that you look at, as priority metrics that you look at. I also hope that you'll consider in some of these decisions the opportunities that there are for alternate technologies. We have a lot of those. I don't know what all of them are, but I know they are out there, and I hope the DEQ will consider that as part of their prioritization as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next four, and you guys can come up and you could facilitate a quicker discussion, but Vicki Watson, Jean Belogini, Connie, I don't know the last name, Keo, and then Meridian Miller. Welcome.
Director Dorrington and DEQ workers, thank you for this opportunity to comment on the value and necessity of assessing climate impacts of state actions under MEPA. My name is Vicki Watson. I'm an emeritus professor here at U of M, where I spent 40 years studying Montana's watersheds and waterways and working for policies to conserve and restore them. I also taught environmental impact analysis, and I want to thank the DEQ MEPA staff who helped with that over the years. It really brought some good examples in. MEPA was passed with bipartisan support, just like our state constitution was, because Montanans recognize the need to ensure that state actions do not degrade our shared environment and that all reasonable efforts will be made to minimize harm and adhere to applicable laws. Well, few things have greater impacts on our waterways and watersheds than do floods, droughts, and extreme heat. Montana's climate scientists have provided strong evidence that such events are already more severe than in the past and are likely to become still more severe in the future. And that means growing impacts on our economy, quality of life, and public safety. It's essential that every state agency, but especially DEQ, consider the risk and impacts associated with increasingly severe climate events when making decisions about plans, permits, and projects. To leave climate effects out of MEPA analysis would be like a healthcare worker trying to help you manage your health, but avoiding any testing or discussion or actions focused on the greatest threats to your health, things like smoking and heart disease and diabetes. Let's not talk about those things. So we really can't ensure a clean and healthy environment in Montana without analyzing and mitigating and adapting to climate impacts and their associated risks. So of course, climate analysis, adaptation, and mitigation must be part of our MEPA analysis, and DEQ must lead the way and help other state agencies accomplish this critical task. I know it's a big task, and I know the DEQ is short-staffed. I plan to advocate for better funding for DEQ to be able to better address this task and the many other critical services you provide to Montanans. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Vicki. We'll see you in 25.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight. I'm Representative Connie Keogh, that's Keogh. I am the state representative for House District 91, which includes Missoula's Rattlesnake and part of the University District. So I really do want to extend a welcome to you tonight. And I know what a big task this is for you to travel across the state. Thank you for doing that, and welcome to our campus. Two of my constituents are my grandchildren. I have an 8-year-old grandson and a 10-year-old granddaughter. I'm here to speak on behalf of them and my the rest of my constituents too. So DEQ asked several questions in the notice for this hearing, including if MEPA needs any changes and what the state should consider when it comes to greenhouse gas analysis. So on the subject of MEPA, I want to add a little bit more to what Vicki said. A little history is in order. MEPA passed in 1971 with a unanimous vote in the Republican-controlled state Senate and only one dissenting vote in the Democrat-controlled state House. Since then, there have been more than 125 proposed pieces of state legislation to amend it, and over 70 have passed. MEPA was designed with the central goal to give citizens a say in their communities. And any changes to MEPA should be to expand the rights and voice of community members. Many of the changes that have been made to MEPA over the years have eroded those rights and curtailed the state's ability to look before we leap, improve proposals, and protect our common resources, like our water and air. We need robust laws and policy to prevent costly disasters and risks to taxpayers. That said, DEQ should not wait for potential changes in state law before acting on the climate. From wildfire and smoke to drought and more, Montanans are seeing the devastating impacts of climate change. The Montana Climate Assessment helped establish locally what we know to be true all over the world, that the costs that climate change is imposing and will impose in the future of our health, environment, economy, and way of life are too great to not take major action. So we have tools to help take a clear look at the impacts, like the social cost of carbon, which was developed by the federal government to quantify climate impacts. And importantly, an assessment of climate impacts needs to look at the full life cycle of emissions from mining and drilling through to combustion. Time for action is now. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Representative Keogh.
Jean Belangi, I.
Hi, Jean. Thank you.
Belangi. Thank you very much for having this meeting and allowing us to speak. I represent myself and my family. I'm a fifth generation Montanan. And I'm also speaking for the 2 generations that are younger than I am. I remember when sewage flowed in the Clark Fork River. I remember when Missoula was ranked number 2 in the country for having the worst air. And then I remember something called the Constitutional Constitution, which gave Montana the only constitution in state constitution in the country to give required clean air, clean environment. And for that reason, then we have MEPA and all the other wonderful little policies that come out of the federal government. And I want to speak to the issues of climate change. In 1960, we had a fire called the Sleeping Child Fire. That was the worst fire that I've ever remembered in my growing up. I was 16. The next worst fire was 2000. Since 2000, every other year we've had fires. Oh, geez, what about the causes? It's getting a little drier out there. Oh, atmospheric rivers. What's an atmospheric river? Is that climate change? Yeah, that's climate change, and we've got them, and they've been here at least 3 times in the last year. Our air is cleaner, but it is not safer. And from that point of view, and the environment is not safer. We still have the danger of losing water, clean water, because we don't have sewage systems that are up to date, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as things develop, MEPA becomes even more important. And I think basically, I think there are a few things that we need to add. One is the historic and cultural destruction that goes on with projects, huge projects that destroy things that are important to the emotional and psychological growth of people and their history. And so from that point of view, I say, good luck, have fun. Oh, and by the way, could you go through all the state agencies and tell them that do we really need a MEPA study to pick up litter off the highway? Because 5 years ago, MDT's little litter pickup permission form had a MEPA study at the top of it. And I said, no, we'd already done that one. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Chief. Meridian.
My name is Meridian, and one of those young people that we keep talking about. Since moving to Montana, I've heard constantly about how impressive our Constitution is. I've heard it from policymakers, ACLU lawyers. Our Constitution is the strongest in any of the 50 states. So how come one of our bodies just gets to ignore our Constitution? How come when it comes to our climate, it's fine to just brush it off? Beyond that, the science is more than clear. When the DEQ folds to the desires of big corporations, they're demonstrating a disgraceful refusal to care about human life, our lives. I know that this isn't what Montana stands for, and I know that you could do better. In closing, I would just like to note that when your scientists are getting arrested as acts of desperation to bring awareness to climate change, something is fundamentally wrong. It is past time to act. It has been past time to act since I was born. Thank you.
We'll go to one online.
Laura Reynolds.
Hello. My name is Laura Reynolds, and I live in Kalispell. And we're having a very strange situation here at the meeting here in Kalispell, which is that we have to each give our comments on our phones, but we can't have our phones on in the meeting room because it makes a lot of feedback with the microphone. So this is very uncomfortable and odd. Anyway, I am a member of the local Flathead chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby, and we like to normally lobby at the federal level for a price on carbon and a carbon cashback being the single most useful policy on reducing carbon emissions. But can they hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Good. But anyway, this is unusual for me speaking about to folks at the state level, and I'm unpracticed. Anyway, but I just want to say that we normally want to focus on our shared values, build relationships, starting from a place of gratitude, respect, and appreciation, that we have core values of focus, optimism, and building relationships. Anyway, I want to just say to the DEQ, please consider carbon in your planning and policy decisions. And regarding MEPA, yes, we do need permitting reform. And when I say that, I include MEPA in the permitting process to make new clean energy future happen for us in a timely way. But no, we do not have license to mess up the environment or degrade wildlife habitat. I feel confident you guys can figure this one out. We are on the brink of a clean energy transition. We have a future of abundance. Let's get after it. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Dylan, appreciate that. Oh. John, and then it's a squiggle. RUMD something, Rumquist maybe? Yes. All right, great. And then Abby, Houston, Hal Schmidt, Peggy Schmidt. John, welcome.
Yes, it's John Rehnquist, RUNDQUIST. I'm the resident of the Ovando area, and I'm a retired engineer and scientist. It's hard not to be cynical about this round of listing, given that past listing efforts by DEQ have resulted in weakening in MEPA rather than improving it. I don't wish to belittle the many great DEQ employees who are dedicated to good science, governance, and beyond my cynicism, I have a cautious hope that ultimately good science and appropriate regulation will prevail to fulfill our constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. For this to happen, though, the forces pushing profits with air, water, and climate degradation will have to take a back seat to a new economy with sustainable prosperity. So, to answer the agency's 3 questions that they have on their website, following are my thoughts. 1, what changes are needed to modernize MEPA? The current environmental review processes and policies have the DEQ captive to the industries that they intend to regulate. MEPA analysis should be performed by DEQ staff rather than cut and paste from the applicant's or the developer's application. To facilitate this further, employment rules should be developed that prohibit DEQ staff from employment by the industry that they have been responsible for regulating for at least 5 years after leaving. 2, what should a MEPA analysis of greenhouse gas emissions and climate impacts include? Well, this is an easy one. Require a full EIS for any project that may cause increased climate greenhouse emissions. Conversely, provide expedited review for projects reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 3, what opportunities exist for state agencies to be more thorough, balanced, efficient, or consistent? This is really the wrong question. Balanced, efficient, consistent are the corporate lobbyist code words to worm their way into weakening rules to make it easier to profit, polluting our planet and poisoning us. The right question is, what opportunities exist for state agencies to better follow the Montana Constitution, laws, and promulgated rules? Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this disturbing day with high temperatures of full 15 to 20 degrees above the historic average in a year that is the hottest on record worldwide. Undeniably due to human caused climate change. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Hi, Director Dorrington and DEQ staff. My name is Abby Husa. I've been lucky to call myself a Missoulian for the past decade. I'm a parent of 2 boys. I was pregnant with my oldest, who's 5.5, in that awful smoky summer of 2017. And for everyone who's here, if you were there, you know it was pretty bad. So I'm, like many of us here tonight, really proud and grateful for the youth plaintiffs who brought the allegations before our state. We're speaking for my kids, certainly, and defending their right to a clean and healthful environment, which includes a safe climate. As a parent of toddlers, I know stall tactics when I see them. They have the capacity to do what's being asked. They just don't really want to. It kind of seems like that's what's happening here. I know DEQ has the ability to analyze climate impacts today and has the tools, but they haven't done it. As a parent, I also know that stalling doesn't change reality. And it's always best to change course, take responsibility, and do the right thing as soon as possible. Or as they say in my son's kindergarten classroom, stop, think, do the right thing. In my experience, MEPA isn't broken, and the law of the land requires DEQ to consider climate now. Please step up, face that reality, and take responsibility for a livable future for my kids and for all of us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Now, welcome.
You need to hit it, or go, taking, save you some time. Hello, my name is Al Schmidt, and
Move the mic closer.
okay. And I do have longer comments I'll submit in November with citations, but I wanted to do something brief here and I'm going to read it, try to speak quickly. I was born in Missoula, reared here, third generation Missoulian. After college, I worked in the woods for 10 years, logging, thinning, slashing, fighting fires. Then I became a teacher, certified secondary science and language arts. I also, besides working K-12 and teaching undergraduate and graduate courses here at the university, I helped start 2 Boys and Girls Clubs and ran an after-school program of public information. My statement here. To me, MEPA is about the public's right to know, about Montana citizens' duty to act, about the public's right to have a voice in decision-making, as well as to make informed choices about who they wish to represent them in state government. It's about allowing citizens to effectively fulfill their duties and responsibilities as identified in the state constitution. That is why I believe MEPA needs to be strengthened. It needs to be robust. It needs to consider factors that impact climate change so that state government, state agencies, and the public can each play their role in leading the state forward responsibly. As an engaged citizenry has long been valued in Montana. Montana is one of 26 states that enshrine some form of citizen initiative ballot measure process in state governments. In Montana, that tradition goes back to 1906. When I was in grade school, after everyone in the house was asleep, I would sit on the end of my bed in an attic window, and watch lights of cars and trucks on Brooks Street, Highway 93. I would watch a TV burner glowing red all night, sometimes 2 TV burners. Some nights I also see men burning cardboard and paper packaging in the incinerators behind Albertsons and Newberry's department store in the newly built Holiday Village Shopping Center. In the morning, I'd walk to school, you couldn't see South Hills, you couldn't see Blue Mountain or Rattlesnake Range. If you could see the M on Mount Sentinel, it was murky through the smog. Then gals get smoke and pollution, gas, formed in the spring of 1968, and they became active. The following year, in February '69, a feature article in Life magazine had the caption, "Would you want to breathe this air?" The first city highlighted with photos and text was Washington, D.C. The second was Missoula, Montana. East Chicago was number 3, Los Angeles number 5, New York City number 7.
Closing comments.
Okay. Now smoke comes in the summertime, blank, it's all of Missoula, it comes from Idaho, West Coast, Canada. Greenhouse gases, methane and CO2 and other toxic chemicals and fossil fuel emissions are not visible to the naked eye like the smoke used to be. We need the public need adequate and reliable data and information, quantitative and qualitative, in order to participate and meet our constitutional duty. Therefore, I stand, as I said at the beginning, I think MEPA needs to be robust, comprehensive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Al. Thank you, Jim. And Hedges. Then Jim Roach.
Hi, I'm Peggy Schmidt. My last name is spelled S-C-H-M-I-D-T. And I want to thank you, Director Dorrington and DEQ staff for having us here tonight to take our comment. I'm speaking as a private citizen, a former teacher, former preschool teacher, and I'm here because I care about those kids' futures and the futures of my own 2 young adult kids. Converting from fossil fuel energy to renewables would reduce annual total energy costs for Montanans by $6.3 billion with a B per year. And that is a 69% savings, almost 70% savings. If you combine the total energy, health, and climate costs, it would be a combined savings of $29 billion per year. That's according to the Held versus Montana fact finding. So there's one big reason that I'm asking you all to consider climate change in permitting. Also, DEQ has, you guys know what you're doing. You've got the tools, the knowledge and the ability to analyze climate change impacts associated with projects. Under oath, a DEQ person said, I do believe we could do this kind of analysis, yes. So you have the tools, I'm asking you to consider those climate change impacts. And I do agree with Amy, we do have to say no to some projects, and that's okay, to be able to say yes to our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome in.
Hello, I'm Ann Hedges with the Montana Environmental Information Center. And I want to start off by saying respect works both ways. So many of the people who have shown up at these hearings, both tonight in Helena and in Billings, have been to Helena so many times to talk about climate change, their concerns and their desire for the state to do something about it. They've asked the legislature, they've asked DEQ, and we're back here asking the same questions and having the same people ask you to do your job. It is time to stop listening, and it is time to start doing. MEPA may be the process, but it is the process that implements our constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. So what are we doing here today? When DEQ admits it does not have the right to write laws, it only follows the direction that it is given in the laws as they are written or as the laws as they are interpreted by the court. The court has interpreted the law. DEQ doesn't have the right to go streamline the law. DEQ doesn't have the right to go modernize the law. DEQ only has the right to comply with the held decision and what the court mandated you do, which is follow the law and analyze climate impacts, not next year, not 2 years from now, but last month. So when I heard industry last night, Northwestern Energy specifically, saying that MEPA has been changed so many times, then now it's confusing and contradictory. Northwestern Energy and the other industries that are here, they have said so many times before the legislature that we need to change MEPA. We need to wholesale revise MEPA, and the legislature abides by that. So if MEPA isn't structured right, it's not our fault. We have opposed all of those changes to MEPA. It's their fault. So if we really want to go and make sure that MEPA is really clear, let's go back to the original version as it was passed in 1971. That law is really clear because it's the same as the National Environmental Policy Act, and courts have been interpreting it for decades. There is a lot of interpretation of that law. We know exactly what it means. The federal government, unlike what somebody says here tonight, has settled on a process. It's called the social cost of greenhouse gas. It's been used hundreds of times already. The state knows what that is. There's clear guidance on it. You could do this yesterday. It is time to stop listening and start doing. The climate, the house is on fire. It is past time for you to do your jobs. Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Jim Roach, ROACH, and I agree with everything that Ann Hedges just said. I think she said it better than I can, that's for sure. But here we go. The DEQ has a foundational duty to protect the environment Montanans live in, recreate in, and work in. The climate crisis, caused primarily by the burning of fossil fuels, is by most scientific reasoning the biggest threat facing our environment. The DEQ has been delinquent in their duty to analyze GHG emissions and their effect on our constitutionally protected environment and report these facts to the public before approving any projects that emit greenhouse gases. My writing's bad. Our access to this information is our right, as shown by the Held versus Montana decision, and it's far past time for the DEQ to start doing their job and analyzing these effects. The climate crisis is accelerating and rapidly, and we can't wait for lawmakers corporations, G40's office, or any other stakeholders to weigh in. The Constitution is clear and the methods and applicability of scientific analysis is readily available. Get on with it and make MEPA meaningful. It's a tool that Montanans need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Meepa Stein, Winona Paschal, Melanie Cunningham, Jim Sayer, Bonnie Gestring.
Good evening, Director Dorrington, DEQ Administration. My name is Winona Rachel. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator for 350 Montana. As many other folks here tonight have said, a myriad of resources are already out there to help the DEQ understand how to best analyze the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions and climate change when considering projects. For example, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 report asserts that the burning of fossil fuels is the #1 factor contributing to climate impacts, and also outlines how to address these impacts. Other state-specific resources include the Montana Climate Assessment and the findings of fact from the recent Health versus Montana trial. To address some of the other questions for thought posed for these hearings, efficiency to me means being informed and taking advantage of this extensive existing research that has already been done, and using that wealth of knowledge to consider climate now when screening new projects. After all, the climate crisis is urgent. We don't have time for public hearings and stakeholder groups. Our most marginalized communities are already experiencing the impacts of climate change. People in this room have lost relatives, livelihoods, or homes to climate disasters. Some losses and changes are not reversible. In 20 years and 50 years, your kids, your grandkids, the mountains and streams that you call home will ask, what did you do?
Hi, my name is Melanie Cunningham, Cunningham, and I didn't pay her to speak before me with those words, but it segues into what I want to speak about. I'm a pediatrician and I'm a member of the Montana chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And I just want to remind you, as you're looking at impacts of projects, that our children from utero all through adolescence are much more impacted physically by climate change, particularly heat and smoke, but all aspects of climate change. And I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough, and I've been speaking with kids right now because I'm doing a presentation in DC on Monday, is about the mental health impacts. And when kids look at me as a baby boomer and say, you're going to die of old age, and I'm going to die of climate change, I think that's incredibly impactful. I think those words and the physiology of kids really needs to be taken into account as you review projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Yupa, spelled Y-O-U-P-A, last name Stein, S-T-E-I-N. I'm here as a citizen. I live near RV. We were less than a mile away from the Big Knife Fire this last summer, so the increasing wildfires that was very present in our lives, in my family's life. I'm also a mother, and I volunteer with Families for Local Climate. I am grateful for DEQ, and your mission is to champion a healthy environment for a thriving Montana. And we cannot have a thriving Montana without considering and acting to prevent climate change, to mitigate climate change. Our health, economic, and the environmental impacts of climate change have to be considered, and they have to be considered now. Thank you.
Thank you, Luba.
Jim Sayer, I'm a member of the board of Montana Environmental Information Center and many of the organizations that presented here tonight. Whew. It's nice to be in the majority in this room because what you're hearing, and I think what you've heard in Helena and Billings, is from a multitude of people that you really need to get going on analyzing the effects of climate emissions in Montana, ASAP. And what I want to emphasize is the gift that you've been given, especially you, Chris. I was at the Senate hearing on 971, HB 971. You remember that just a few months ago? When the legislature jammed through that bill to say that, no, you shouldn't analyze climate emissions. And that's the same bill that was enjoined in Hell v. Montana just a month ago. So that law no longer exists, it's been kicked off. The other thing I saw was, I observed the hearing for Hell v. Montana, and I think, Chris, and I can't remember, Sonia, if you also were testifying at that hearing, were you there too? Yeah. So anyways, I was shocked by the level of unawareness about the IPCC, so many factors related to the climate crisis that our top environmental officials did not know anything about. Well, the judges ruled 16 kids have given you an enormous gift, the opportunity to now do the right thing, to analyze climate emissions, hopefully with a view to action, because Ann Hedges said it right. You guys have been listening for a long time, and I know it's a hard role to be in, to be leaders, to be in an administration. But Chris, you just told me over there in the corner that you are a get-it-done guy. That's why you were appointed as the head of DEQ. That is why you were appointed as the head of the Housing Commission, and I salute you for the work that that commission has done right now to help advance more housing in Montana. So I know my time is up, but I just want to say, if you're a get-it-done guy, I want you to go back and talk to the governor and say, you know, we have an opportunity now. We've been given a gift by 16 young people in Montana to do the right thing, to deal with this 10 alarm fire that's global, but it's also in Montana. You can do it. You can do it tomorrow. But please come out of these listening sessions with a report that says, hey, we're going to do the right thing and we're going to start working on the climate crisis now. Thank you.
Bonnie, before you go, Bonnie, Beth Taylor, Michael Hudson.
Hello, DQ Director, DQ staff. My name is Bonnie Gestring. I'm the Northwest Program Director at Earthworks. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting communities and the environment against the adverse impacts of mineral and energy development, seeking sustainable solutions. And we face a climate crisis with devastating consequences for really every facet of our lives. Our economy, our health and safety, the health and welfare of our fish, wildlife, rivers, and most importantly, our children. DEQ's mission, as I just heard someone else mention, is to champion a healthy environment for a thriving Montana. And there's nothing more essential to that mission than to address climate change. We urge DEQ to use its authority and readily available tools to implement MEPA and analyze the impacts of proposed projects on the climate. No delays. No delays. Thanks.
Thank you, Bonnie. Taylor Wilson and Michael Hudson. That waves.
My name is Michael Hudson, Hudson. Good evening. I am here because I'm a dad. As a parent, a huge part of my purpose is to protect my children and to look out for every child. MEPA should have the same purpose. Climate change presents an enormous threat to all of our children. There is no doubt about this, and time is running out. I am deeply concerned. I am angry. I really hope that this is not just another stall. In referring to the Hell versus Montana case victory, the Department of Justice stated, Montanans can be blamed for changing the climate. As if we didn't know that. We didn't cause climate change. We didn't cause climate change, but we did in fact contribute to the problem. Now, it is simply time for us to be part of the solution. We are the 11th largest petroleum producer in the country and sit on some of the largest remaining coal reserves on the planet. We must keep this carbon in the ground. The lives of our children and grandchildren depend on it. While our state government and the monopoly of Northwestern Energy is fighting the transition to renewable energy, the Dakotas, Wyoming, Washington, Oregon are all jumping in primarily, at least in the case of the Dakotas and Wyoming, primarily to take advantage of the cheaper energy costs and the drive of good paying jobs in the renewable energy sector. But we also have enormous potential for renewable energy production. We no longer have to choose between clean energy and the economy. Renewable energy is now cheaper than fossil fuels. Renewable energy is reliable. It's excellent for jobs, it's good for energy independence, and it's essential for our kids. So my ask, MEPA must consider the impacts of greenhouse gases in all its analysis and should model clean energy alternatives to every assessment for proposed new fossil fuel projects. At this point, the science is clear, we must stop burning fossil fuels. The cost of carbon and greenhouse emissions must be factored into every MEPA analysis. Montanans care about each other and we are no fools. Over the years, public participation in the MEPA process has been reduced. We expect to be brought back into the conversation and to be heard in the review process. I am asking you to genuinely consider the climate in every appropriate analysis.
Thank you, Mike. Carla Abrams, Dan Bucks, Jeff Jewell, Sebastian Cyrillus. I think Sebastian will know. Welcome.
Hi, welcome and thank you for sharing your thoughts and solutions. Well, that's just really good. Sorry. My name is Carla Abrams. I help out 350 Montana, and I am a proud graduate of the master's program in environmental studies here at the University of Montana. So I want to thank DEQ for calling us here today. But I ask, why? Montanans are ready to act on the climate. So where are you, DEQ? MEPA, the Montana Environmental Policy Act, is called the People's Law. It is a critical component of environmental permitting and public participation. Well, here we are. Look at all these people, you, and this is what we're here for. I'm proud to be part of the People's Law. MEPA has already been modified and streamlined a number of times, so enough of that. We know the DEQ must consider the climate impacts, including decisions about whether or not to grant permits for fossil fuel infrastructure, refineries, coal mines, and gas plants. The DEQ has the tools to act now. Any modifications to MEPA must stand up to conform with constitutional requirements. MEPA cannot be rendered into a procedural, voluntary, non-substantive process. DEQ has the tools to act now. DEQ staff has said they can analyze climate impacts in the MEPA process. So we're all set, all ready to go. According to DEQ, our people's comments today will inform ongoing conversations. I say no. According to DEQ, there will be a diverse stakeholders group. I say no. According to the DEQ website, this is one of Montana's bedrock environmental laws. Well, how do you destroy bedrock? By mining, by blasting, by laying miles of pipe, by delay, by stalling? I say no. As a person, I defend the people's law, the Montana Environmental Policy Act. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Jeff Jewell, that's J-U-E-L. I'm really humbled and honored to speak here tonight amongst so many amazingly well-spoken folks who preceded me to this podium, who came here on this beautiful fall Montana evening and could be outside enjoying that, but saw this is something far more important. They're willing to sacrifice, and I think as a society, we all need to do that same kind of thing and sacrifice some of our conveniences and move on from fossil fuels. I'm here because I'm aware that there are certain elements in our state government that want to tip the scales of justice in favor of vested interests that make a lot of money for the status quo and against future generations, our children, grandchildren, people we'll never know in the future, but who are now speaking to us through the voices of those that are suffering already the consequences of climate change, speaking to us to act. And I just wanted to amplify their voices, come here, echo that, and make sure that DEQ hears those, because as people said, we don't have any more time to wait. Time to act is now, and let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Dan Bucks. Sebastian.
Mr. Director and members of the DEQ staff, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Dan Bucks. I'm retired from a career in public policy and administration that began in 1971, career here in Montana and beyond. I'm also, most importantly, a grandfather and who's concerned about the future, not only of my own grandchildren, but that of grandchildren everywhere. I'll try to be direct and brief. MEPA should be amended to require full consideration of all material environmental impacts, including climate change, and should require that the results of such analyses shall actually affect the decisions for the proposed actions that were being studied. It's a waste of dollars to do limited analyses because courts will simply strike those analyses down as inadequate. It's a waste of dollars to do the analysis and then not take them fully into account in the decision-making for the actions that we're studying. Revising MEPA in these ways will prevent serious harm to people, the economy, and the environment, and to future generations, especially from climate change. Number two, MEPA should recognize the right of private property can be properly limited if the uses of property impose harm on other people and property, both now and in the future. Economic theory teaches that if such harms are not corrected, economic results are less than optimal and diminish the well-being of society. MEPA should also recognize the economic benefits of actions to protect the environment. We know that the evidence is that if we transition away from fossil fuels to renewable sources with energy storage and improved electrical grids, our economy and environment will both flourish long into the future. Fourth, and finally, MEPA should be amended to eliminate the legislature's attempt to seize the power of the judiciary to be the final arbiter of constitutional rights. That appears in section 75(1-103), subsection 3. It is wrong, it is inconsistent with our constitutional system of separation of powers and should be excised from that law. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Randy, you're on deck. Yep, Sebastian's up, Randy's next.
Hello, my name is
Randy York is next.
My name is Sebastian Strauss, spelled S-T-R-A-U-S-S. First of all, thank you for arranging these listening sessions. I will start with a modified quote from Gaylord Nelson. He said, "The ultimate test of a person's conscience may be their willingness to sacrifice something today for future generations whose words of thanks will not be heard." And when I talk about sacrificing, I mean, for instance, sacrificing fossil fuel industry profits, or that means, yes, to say no in order to make a better future, or say no to certain things. I am a Missoula resident and a mechanical engineer who has worked for over 23 years in the fossil fuel related field of combustion engines. So in many ways, I have also somewhat contributed to the crisis we are in. Specifically, I worked in exhaust emissions testing, and I literally watched with my own eyes how our climate's background CO2 levels, the greenhouse gas, climbed steadily over all these years of conducting this emission testing. So I'm intimately familiar with what's happening in the background, and we're all seeing what has happened as a result with our climate. I also want to note, I've heard there's an argument made that with respect to the Health of Montana decision, that there's an argument made that the climate is not the environment. And I argue that the climate is, and the climate shapes our environment. This valley, these beautiful mountains around us are all shaped by the climate. It was over millions of years by wind, rain, snow, temperatures. You can never disconnect our environment from the climate. They are one and the same. And a climate in crisis will further deteriorate people's livelihoods and deprive our and future generations of their constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. Not considering climate impacts during environmental impact assessments as required by the courts would be ignoring a reality that will inevitably catch up with any decisions that are made based on insufficient information. So I urge you to consider those facts, to act now, and to act fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Randy York. Next up, Bob Gentry. Gary Knudsen. No, Mattson. Gary Mattson after that.
Yeah, my name is Randy York. Been sitting here for the last hour and a half listening to everybody talk, and I just took my prepared comments and set them aside. Because essentially it would be very redundant, not as eloquently expressed as has been by so many people that come in front of me. I do thank you people for coming over here. I know it's your duty, but it's difficult that your family come over here, possibly risky, unpleasant interactions with people. But I thank you. I think you're doing your job. Now we need to take this back to Helena and make sure we implement all these comments. What I'm bothered by right now is the fact that we're still all talking about climate change as an existential threat. My God, people, we're up to our neck in climate change. It's a crisis. It's devouring us right now. There's nothing existential about it in the future. It's here. It's bad. It's going to get worse. The chances of us hitting or living for 1.5 degrees Celsius, 2.7 Fahrenheit will probably be exceeded by, I'd say, 2029, 2030 at best. We're looking at 1.7. You know, 1.5 and 1.7 is linear, but the effects of 1.5 and 1.7 is a far cry from linear. You think 1.5 is much worse than 1.3, well, 1.7 will be unbelievably worse than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And even if we stop at 1.7, we might be moving up to 2 degrees by 2050. And beyond that, we're going to have the Earth anywhere near the equator is going to be unlivable. You know, we've got the northern part of it warming much faster. In fact, this last summer, the Earth was at 1.5 degrees Celsius for 3 consecutive days. It didn't stay there. And every time that happens, it's going to be likely it will. So in relation to the job that you need to do, I think we need to look at something like the fact you need to be, science needs to be your guide. Hardcore empirical data, facts that are provable over and over again. That should be guiding you. This other thing, your mission is essentially going to be dictated to you by the acronym by which you are identifying yourself, the DEQ. Now that doesn't mean Department of Environmental Degradation. It means the Department of Environmental Quality. And it's basically they're based on the goal of protecting our rights to have a sound and healthy environment, all aspects.
Closing comments.
Climate change cannot be simply thought of as just climate. It is simply the manifestation of a myriad of other subordinate things happening right now. Everything from water quality, air quality, to biodiversity, to species extinction, to plastic pollution. All these things are together to the fault of having a non-circular economy. It's all there. And by ignoring climate change in the policy year, you're essentially going to ignore any type of future, economically, environmental, for the state of Montana and all its citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brandon.
My name is Bob Gentry. I'm from Missoula. Respectfully, DEQ and other agencies continue to evade their legal responsibilities by calling MEPA just a process, as if procedure doesn't matter. If this process, if done in good faith, is the way that significant impacts are found and considered under the substantive provisions of the permitting laws. So, first of all, please understand that Montana's constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment is the progeny of MEPA. MEPA was passed in 71 and the CONCON was in 72. So quickly, context, the company, the Anaconda Company, everybody knows, had a stranglehold on Montana's politics and environment. And from Butte to Missoula, natural resources bore the brunt of the harm caused by the company's single-minded pursuit of the dollar in a complete vacuum of state agency oversight. Eventually, the company pulled out. They left big trucks and personal property in the bottom of the Berkeley pit. The environmental legacy of the company is clear. Everybody knows, or at least you should know, that the water in the Berkeley pit, it has to be perpetually pumped and treated. That's forever. Turns out that the soluble, bioavailable salts of copper, zinc, lead, arsenic, mercury, cadmium are not good for life. The groundwater underneath the Opportunity Ponds and the Anaconda Smelter slag heap may be non-toxic in 50,000 years. In response to this horrifying legacy, MEPA was passed to require government agencies to consider consequences of their permitting actions, basically to exercise that ounce of prevention. I'm wrapping up here. So as demonstrated and held, Montana's constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment undergirds and reinforces the provisions of MEPA. Currently, faced with an unprecedented threat of climate change, as far as we know, the Earth is unique in the universe. This is an amazing place, an amazing and unique place. It's our responsibility to take care of it. Procedure is not meaningless. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Gary Matson.
Good evening, and thank you so much for being here. My name is Gary Matson. I'm science advisor for Friends of Two Rivers, a environmental based nonprofit with a mission for environmental protection.
Will you lean in just a little bit? You have a softer voice, there you go.
I'm also a Northern Plains Resource Council Clean Energy Task Force member. And I would just like to agree with the observations that have been made tonight that the Held versus Montana decision was landmark. And it now allows the consideration of climate change. And that DEQ is the agency that can best take care of guaranteeing Montana's constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. And with those observations in mind, I have 4 specific suggestions for what DEQ can do. And these are: 1, DEQ must require an SBB evaluation for each facility utilizing fossil fuels. A, the annual and lifetime quantity of the facility's greenhouse gas emissions. B, the annual climate degradation cost of its greenhouse gas emissions using a credible estimate of the social cost of carbon, which is everywhere from $50 to $190. The International Monetary Fund at COP27 suggested $75 a ton. C, the applicant's confirmation of knowledge about the extensive climate degradation occurring throughout the world, as given in a thorough current global impact summary provided by DEQ. D, the cost and feasibility of an alternative clean energy facility, that is one utilizing only renewable energy resources, verified by a credible third party. And I additionally would suggest and hope that when called upon to testify regarding the impacts of greenhouse gas emissions, DEQ must utilize all available evidence to clearly state the unacceptable consequences of continuing greenhouse gas emissions. DEQ must be a strong advocate to ensure that these emissions are eliminated from Montana facilities at the earliest practical date. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for giving me that. I appreciate it. John Marshall.
Okay, if you don't mind time, anybody else?
John Waves. That's the last of our list. Anything online? If anyone would like to speak online, they can raise their hand and Rebecca will recognize them. We're gonna go online first. With no one online? Okay, why don't you guys just line up in the middle center row? Okay, so we'll adhere to the 2 minutes. We have about 20 minutes. It looks like there's ish 10 of you, so welcome.
Welcome. I did sign up. I don't know if I.
That's okay.
My name is Patricia Ames, AMES, and I live here in Missoula. 4 generations of my family have been born and raised in Montana. My grandparents were homesteaders and dairy farmers. They lived across the Missouri River from the Anaconda Copper Company's smelter operation in Great Falls. We all know how that story ended. It's now a taxpayer-funded Superfund site. Currently, Montana has 16 taxpayer-funded Superfund sites that have no cleanup in sight. The definition of a robber baron is a person who has become rich through ruthless and unscrupulous business practices. As we all know all too well, Montana has a long history of robber barons, including present-day robber barons who come in, request permits through the DEQ, and promise environmental stewardship.
Still to this day, robber baron after robber baron are given permits with strict rules they are to follow, only to go bankrupt, walk away from their created environmental disasters that we then have to live with, suffer the consequences of, and ultimately have to pay for. The Montana Environmental Policy Act, or the People's Law, is a critical component of environmental permitting and public participation in Montana. It is often referred to as the look before you leap law, as it requires state agencies to consider and affords the public opportunity to comment on the environmental, fish and wildlife, economic, social, and cultural impacts of proposed projects, such as air, water, and mining permits before their approval. Any changes to MEPA must assure that it still explicitly fulfills the government's obligation to maintain and improve the constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment, as well as the public's constitutional right to know and participate. In order to preserve the integrity of the MEPA process and not turn it into a paper exercise, MEPA cannot be rendered into a procedural, voluntary, non-substantive process. There must be repercussions when industry or the government fail to comply with MEPA. Further, as required under the Constitution and noted by the court in Held versus Montana, the state must have the ability and indeed has the obligation to deny permits to protect the public from environmental harm, such as the harm occurring right now from climate change. It is the only protection Montana citizens have against modern day robber barons. The DEQ must seriously consider climate change in the MEPA process. It is causing profound impacts on Montana's health, economy, and environment, as found by the court in the Held decision. We must abide by our Constitution and uphold our right to a clean and healthful environment. The DEQ currently has the tools, knowledge, and ability to analyze and eliminate change impacts associated with projects.
Closing comment, please.
The Department of Environmental Quality is a public agency paid for by the taxpayers of Montana and is staffed by individual people who make decisions that affect living Montanans now, as well as future generations of children. Records are kept into perpetuity. How do you want history to recognize your contributions to Montana's environment? Your names will be on the documents that either protect our environment or lead to environmental destruction. I hope you make the right choice. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Patricia.
Good evening. My name is John Romano, and I'm the Executive Director of Disaster Central, a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to encourage the development of disaster-resistant communities to reduce the effects of natural and man-made disasters on life and property. I'm here to say there's a social cost. I'm here to urge action on greenhouse gas reduction. I attend stakeholder calls with the Montana DES, Department of Emergency Services, Disaster Housing Work Group. We've been working on the issue to this day on the Red Lodge disaster and various smaller events that don't reach the radar screen in the press in Montana. The data is in. The loss of life and property is quantified time and time again. The greater frequency and intensity of severe weather events is real. And to those who are still in denial of causal factors of climate change to severe weather events, I would be happy to share with them the strong correlations and the research and numerous studies that we have accumulated. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I'm a retired attorney, resident of Missoula County in Montana for the past almost 50 years. I don't have any technical or scientific expertise to offer or to bring to bear, but I have educated myself as carefully and thoroughly as I can on these issues. And like most people here, I'm sure, I have an intense concern for the health, the ecosystems that support human and non-human life in Montana and the world. The other thing I can bring to bear, I think, is my age.
72. There's other people who have noted, it's doubtful that whatever DEQ decides procedurally here will affect me very much personally in what remains of my life, but it will affect my 2 children, will affect my 4 young grandchildren, will affect the descendants that follow, just as it will yours. Putting on my former lawyer hat, I offer this analysis to you. What should guide you in these decisions? First thing is to recognize that the law should guide you. The law in Montana starts with the Constitution. State Constitution, as we all know, guarantees a clean and healthful environment. Contrary to the arguments that have been made on the other side of this issue, the recent health decision has found unequivocally that these words are not mere aspirational in nature. They're not a collection of aspirational words, but they're an enforceable legal guarantee to protect all of us who live here. The second legal principle that you should be guided by is the clear and unequivocal legal responsibility you have to follow the law, which right now is the Constitution and the health decision. But thirdly, I offer you that you also have your own interest and duty as public servants, ensuring a clear and healthful environment for those of us here and those who you love as well. The vast evidence that's been produced on these issues confirms 3 things: the existence of human-caused climate change, the growing critical nature of the threats caused by it, and third, the need for immediate action to remediate it and to deal with it. The clock is ticking, as it has been for the past many years. I was thinking about what I wanted to say tonight in these brief moments I have. I happened to come across very accidentally a statement in a magazine yesterday that said this, and I urge this upon you when you make your decisions. The quote was, "The future of the natural world is in our hands." And that's not hyperbole. That is literally true here. What you decide will follow us in the years and decades to come. Closing thoughts. Okay. And what I was going to repeat is what somebody else had said, which is looking ahead decades or a century ahead, what will people say if, as much as we are now on notice of the effects of climate change and its consequences for us, we simply let things drift along. We decide to study it further for more time, and we never quite get around to do anything until it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Hello, good evening. My name is Amy Haynes. I've been a physician, a primary care physician in Missoula for 39 years. Over in that time, treating people in the 1980s to treating them now, health has gotten extremely complex. People are not responding to good treatments as well as they used to. We're in big trouble as far as our health goes. Chronic disease is on the rise. We're losing our children. I think we had a pediatrician speak. We're losing our children to environmental causes. We know that most diseases are caused by environmental problems. And I wasn't going to speak tonight, but there's this big dark hole that nobody is talking about. I haven't heard anybody speak about it. And that is animal agriculture. And when you write that down, I can see you writing it down. Everybody write that down. Animal agriculture. Underline that 3 or 4 times, because over 50% of greenhouse gases is due to animal agriculture. And it's time that we address this huge elephant in the room. And that's all of our responsibility, because we're cutting down massive amounts of forest for grazing cows, and we're using hundreds of thousands of gallons of water, right? And it's creating a tremendous amount of greenhouse gas and other pollution in the soil and in the water. We've overfished our oceans to the extent that we're not sure how well that they can come back. So when you buy that slab of meat, whether it's chicken or beef or whatever it is you're eating, on that styrofoam plate wrapped in that plastic, that is representing thousands of gallons of water and cutting down massive amounts of forest.
Now, I know that we are a ranching community and I love that culture, quite frankly. And I'm not talking about small, ranches and, you know, a backyard full of chickens. I'm talking about the megalithic agriculture industry that is killing us.
Closing comments.
Oh, is that how I get it?
You're already over 2
Here's
minutes.
what I want you to do. I want you and everybody here to watch the movie Cowspiracy. So write that down, because I'm watching you write this down. I want you to watch the movie Cowspiracy. You might have to pay somebody to watch it, $7.95, not too much. Watch the movie Cowspiracy, and I want each of you to educate yourself about what animal agriculture is actually doing to us. And I want you to start to educate the public. Start to talk about it. Don't be afraid. I mean, I know that there was a lot of assassinations in Brazil for all the environmentalists down there, but still, we're not going to assassinate you here in Montana, although a lot of us are well armed. Talk and talk and talk about animal agriculture. It's critically important. Okay, thank you for listening.
Okay, Frank Solasi, SZOLLOSI, Executive Director of the Montana Wildlife Federation, based in Missoula. We this weekend are going out to pack our fridge with big game, elk and deer, not animal agriculture. So sustenance and do-it-yourself hunters and anglers have a vested interest in MEPA. There are grave threats to ecological, economic, and cultural values when it comes to wildlife and fisheries in Montana. And MEPA is critical for us to know impacts of projects. Very simple suggestion to ask for solutions. As you're looking at permitting projects or analyzing impacts, have a column in your spreadsheet for greenhouse gas emissions and whether the project will contribute to or detract from the state's own goal, recommended goal of greenhouse gas neutrality by 2045 to 2050. Montana's a leader. It's one of a few states that have goals for greenhouse gas emissions. Use the greenhouse gas protocol. There are measurements and reporting and verifiable standards out there. I was in Lewistown a few years ago. They had a I don't know if it was the city or a nonprofit group or the county, but they had signs on the trees downtown Lewistown of how much tons of greenhouse gas that particular tree was going to suck out of the air every year. Because they could put that on cards on trees in downtown Lewistown, certainly professional environmental professionals at DEQ can figure this out and get at it. You don't need listening sessions. The science is clear. You know that. Respect your chops. Let's just get to it. It's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Good evening. My name is Dan Spencer. I'm a recently retired professor of environmental studies here at the University of Montana. Probably more importantly, I'm married to Dan, to Colin, and Megan, who my grandchildren who live here in Missoula. And but one of the things I look forward to every year right now, I'm working with a program called the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, or YSEALI. And twice a year, we bring in young leaders from Southeast Asia, 11 countries, to look at environmental issues and citizen democracy in Montana. And one of the meetings I'm most looking forward to every time is meeting with Jim Mopella, where we meet with the DEQ, with Chris, all of your staff there. And it's always an extraordinary meeting, in part because these young people are extraordinary young people, but they come from countries where that kind of citizen democracy is inconceivable. The fact that you would take the time to meet with, not even Montanans, people who come from other countries, and explain how our process works and answer their questions. And so if they were here tonight, they would be stunned by seeing a government that is responsive to its citizens and asking for input. But of course, that means that we have to respond to that input as well. And I'm trusting that you will do that as well. I want to just make two other points on there. For 20 years at the University of Montana, I taught environmental ethics, among other things. When I started here in 2002, I decided to integrate something about climate change into every one of my classes, whether it was on literature, ethics, or globalization, whatever, because I felt like it was impossible to fully understand the extent of our problems without understanding how they affect climate change, how climate change affects them. The very first step we do in ethical analysis is analyzing the situation, because we can't know how to act ethically and act well unless we understand the situation clearly. I don't understand how we could not analyze this environmental situation clearly in Montana without incorporating climate change. It's that pervasive. So strongly encourage you to get on with that right now. The final point I've simply made is I'm always so impressed with so much of the work of the DEQ. I spent 15 years teaching a class on ethical issues of restoration. We looked at the cleanup of the Clark Fork River through the Deer Lodge Valley and Milltown Dam. And it's an extraordinarily hopeful situation to see how DEQ can work with citizens, work with other groups to really make positive change here. But the elephant in the room on the cleanup of the Clark Fork is the Berkeley pit. And other people have talked about it. Warm Springs ponds are also part of that here. And they should serve as a really potent symbol of the need for the precautionary principle. To look carefully before we make actions that are close to non-reversible. Climate change is one of those. We're rapidly approaching tipping points that will make whatever work we do in the future irreversible. And so I strongly encourage you to implement these right now. Give us the full analysis we need to be able to act well so that we avoid any more Berkeley pits with the climate change in the future. But above all, thank you so much for the work you do and for listening to your constituents.
Thank you, Dan. Respect you as well. Thank you. We're ready in round two.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit quickly.
2 minutes, okay?
I'm not going to say anything you haven't heard before, so nothing you need notes for here. As Mark said earlier, the future of our natural world is in our hands. Now, I would like to reiterate that by saying the purpose of the Montana Environmental Policy Act, MEPA, is to declare a state policy that will encourage productive, enjoyable harmony between humans and their environment. So let's do a quick Google search while I've got your time. If I research how many land animals exist in the state of Montana, it says over 550. So let's use that number 550. It was published just recently that with the current amount of climate change that we have locked in, this is pretty much unchangeable if we do not act right now. It says that around 14% of all species are at risk of extinction. So 550, that means 77 species in the state of Montana are at risk of extinction right now. Now, almost half of all known species have already experienced population decline. So if we take that 550, that means 225 species in the state of Montana have already experienced population decline. How can we not act on this today? Thank you.
Thank you. Back again. Thank you.
Tonight, back again. As I listen to everybody, I realize that we're talking a lot about the fossil fuel industry and Berkeley pits and all that environmental degradation that we run into. What we haven't talked about is the future degradation. Planned for the Southern Bitterroots is possibly the largest rare earth and lithium mine in the country until last week, when the Nevada, I think it was the Ute tribe, has filed a suit against the state of Nevada for allowing their newly discovered lithium mine, which is bigger than our lithium mine. So the question you have to ask is, as we go into the new technologies, what are the side effects equivalent to the oil industry, equivalent to the coal industry? What does, I know what uranium does. I'm a double down winder. So what does lithium do? What do the rare earths do? These aren't nice little chemicals sitting around on the planet. These are potent chemicals, and there are not a lot of them. But if they're in our water systems or degrading the mountains, because supposedly what that sounds, that mine is at the top of the mountain of 3 rivers, the Bitterroot, the Lochsaw, and the Salmon. And all of them would be degraded if improper mining action is taken. What happens with the platinum mines? What happens with the gold mines? The gold mine in the Blackfoot is no longer functioning because, thank you guys, you denied the permits. But what are we going to do about the future, about the chemicals, about the wars, about all that stuff that's gonna come out of the earth to replace the oil, the copper, etc. And that's another question that you have to face with. And in terms of biodiversity, two of the things that are now up for consideration on a national level as an endangered species in Montana are the white bark pines and the western bumblebee.
Closing comment?
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean.
Good evening. I will be brief. I know we're running behind. My name is Paige Atchison. I'm a Missoula resident. I have a 6-month-old and 3-year-old at home, and that is why I'm here tonight. Two very quick things. First, any changes to MEPA, I believe should expand public participation and ensure that the process benefits the health of Montana communities over special interests. Secondly, and so importantly, we absolutely have to analyze the climate impacts of proposed projects and enable the state to deny permits for any projects that will threaten the future of our children. At the beginning, you said that MEPA was the process to look before leaving, to not consider greenhouse gas emissions and climate impacts would be a major and unacceptable blind spot that will knowingly cause harm to communities across the state, children, and future generations. And I sincerely hope that you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. One last round. Right. Thank you much for your participation tonight. We do very much appreciate your time and good night. Thank you.